From the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, flat water free press. Joining us to talk more about it are the organization's editor, Matthew Hansen, and Matt Wynn. Matt is the executive director of Nebraska Journalism Trust. Thank you both so much for being here and welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
You bet. Matthew, I'm going to start with you. What makes good journalism?
I thought that was funny. That was the first question because Matt knows that I could talk about this for the next half hour.
We're good.
Over. What makes good journalism is super complicated, but I think I can make it simple. It's important. It's knowledge-based. It is not boring. That's one of the things that I think is often missed when we think about good journalism. Somehow has to be staid or recitation of facts. I actually think that people connect to good journalism when it's told through the eyes of real human beings, when it's stories as we understand stories from the dawn of time, when they have a beginning, middle, and end, when we can attach to something in the human experience, something that we understand deep within ourselves in the people that we are reading about. So I really think that the good journalism is often people-based.
Okay, thank you. And Matt, how does that compare with what's happening today?
I still think there's a lot of good journalism happening, but there's tremendous pressure, right? We have corporate ownership where the metric of success is dollars. It's not the things that I grew up thinking that mattered. It's a 24-hour news cycle, right? So instead of doing the best thing you can do today, do the best piece and run it tomorrow and see what we can do the next day, it's a constant battle to get the best news that you can at the moment, the most news you can. Our metric is clicks, right? In every newsroom I've worked in, there's literally a board on the wall with these are the top stories, here's how many people are reading it right now. You can see your headline move up or down the list as people click on it more. That's what success is. That's a far cry from, are you on the front page? Did you change policy? Do you have meaning in people's lives? We've lost that somewhere along the line. There's still people doing great work. There's plenty of work going on in the state even, but we just want to make sure that remains the case.
When did that journalism tide turn, do you think, Matt? I mean, when did you wake up one day and go, wow, this is just really different?
Yeah. It's interesting because if you asked me a year ago, I wouldn't be able to pinpoint a time. But having now been researching this and putting this together, I can point to the exact moment. 2008, if you look at our employment of journalists in Nebraska, it's shocking, right? There's a steady decline, and in 2008, it craters. We are down, as a state, 52%. Our journalism force is down 50. It is less than half of what it was 20 years ago. That's shocking. Employment everywhere else has gone up, but our journalism core, the people who are telling stories, who are finding truth, who are asking hard questions, those sorts of things, they've been halved. And at the same time, there's this kind of competing thing going on where PR ranks and people trying to put spin and really complicate the journalism effort, those ranks have doubled, tripled, quadrupled, which is yet another external factor making journalism really hard to do right now.
So, listening to him, Matthew, how is what he is describing impacting society overall, your opinion?
I mean, you don't have to go much farther than what's happening in the country right now. I mean, the amount of misinformation tied to a thing like vaccines or vaccination, where we sort of get our news as a society, the idea that the bedrock of a democracy is an informed citizenry, something that I think that we would all agree with, I would hope, as Americans. I mean, that's at real risk right now. And one of the reasons that it's at risk is this, what Matt is talking about, just sheer numbers. And that's, Nebraska isn't the exception here, right? In fact, in a lot of ways, this has happened later in Nebraska than it's happened in a lot of other states. People know about food deserts And you've heard that terminology. Well, there's more and more the term news deserts is used, and this happens in rural areas, it's happening in suburban areas, and it's also happening at this point in some major cities in our country. There simply isn't the number of people doing this hard, good work. And one of the consequences of that is that people have nowhere else, or think they have nowhere else, or choose to get their news from nowhere else besides social media.
And that doesn't sit well with either of you. And before we talk about your new endeavor, I'd like to give our viewers an idea of your own backgrounds. Matthew, let's start with you. What brought you here to this point?
I am a child of Red Cloud, Nebraska, population 1,000. My first journalism job was writing my own stories of my own American League baseball team in the Red Cloud Chief newspaper. So it's gone from those very humble beginnings all the way to I was a columnist at the World Herald for 6 years after being a reporter there. But along the way, I worked at the Hastings Tribune. I worked at the Daily Nebraskan when I was at the University of Nebraska Lincoln, the Journal Star, the World Herald. I mean, I really am a creature in some way of Nebraska print journalism, and I'm 41, and that's been true since I was 16. So it's really been a lifetime kind of lived inside this world, and one of the things that when you've spent as much time in it as I have, you really want to start to do things to try to see it sustained and to help it sort of grow into this next phase.
Yeah. Well, you've certainly experienced some frustrations along the way, and I guess I have to ask you from your Red Cloud days, what has been the big draw for you in this field? What has been that constant that even if you're feeling like, I don't know if I can do this anymore the way that it's being done, but somehow you circle back and continue on, right? Perseverance. What has that been for you?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that it's who I am. It's not even really, it doesn't necessarily feel like a choice in some way. It's the same way, and I think a lot of journalists probably feel the same way. And you use terminology like it's a calling, and the danger there is that if you call it a calling and you sort of teach your entire workforce that it's a calling, it turns out that you don't have to pay those people very much. But for me, it's certainly been something that I have connected to at a molecular level since I was a teenager. So it doesn't really feel like a choice to me, and I'm super, super excited to be in this sort of position where we're going to try to grow this thing into the future and build something that lasts beyond us.
Can I ask you something as you're talking, and our viewers are probably wondering too, is storytelling mindful of the process? Does it come easy to you, or do you find that you are challenged from time to time?
I'm certainly challenged, but I mean, one of the things that storytelling is I mean, it's a trade in some way, right? It's repetitive. Once you do it, and I don't know how many times I've done it, but thousands of times, right? There's a little bit of second nature that happens. So it does become easier. It's interesting though, sometimes it becomes a little too paint by numbers when you've done it too much, and you really have to break yourself out of, I felt myself as a World Herald columnist, for example, getting into bad habits related to the way that I would write things, kind of, sort of write things the same way over and over. So there's some things that you can learn that are bad lessons, but no, doing it many, many times, and that's what I tell young reporters or people who want to be reporters, you just got to do this. And once you do it a lot, you're going to start to figure it out.
Good advice, thank you. Matt, what about you? What's your story?
Yeah, I mean, I got the journalism bug down the road here at Central High School, low forever ago. And from there, it was like, this is what I'm meant to do. Holding truth to power, asking hard questions, making people uncomfortable, telling stories that people are trying to hide, that sort of thing. That just got me in a way that nothing else can come close. I went to University of Missouri and kind of worked around from there. I went to Springfield, Missouri. I had a job as an editor, which was a terrible thing to do to a 23-year-old. And then I went to Arizona Republic for a couple more years before I came back to Omaha. Editor at the World Herald called me up, asked if I wanted to come back home, and it was yeah, of course I do. This is where I went to journalism. This is where I want to do it. And I thought I was going to be there for the rest of my career. That did not happen. In 2015, I think, I went to a place called MedPage Today, where I was the director of Enterprise and Investigative, and that was a really cool job. And in a lot of ways, it kind of echoes what we're doing here, right? It was doing stories that are outside the traditional news cycle, are kind of made from a reporter saying, hey, this is weird, this is interesting, this is wrong. And then telling it to our audience, which there was doctors across the country, right? That's who we cared about, that's who we wrote for, that was our audience. And from there, I partnered with a lot of newspapers around the country in that role. And so it was an easy move to go to USA Today on the investigative team there, where I was one of the data editors. We had a team of 7, and we worked on kind of the biggest it was the kind of thing where you would take, we would have a meeting in January and talk about stories we wanted to run before the year was out. That sort of cadence, and really taking the time to do heady projects that got in deep and saw what was wrong and tried to fix it.
Okay, so when did you two, how did you come together? And then here you are again. So how did your roads cross here?
Some poor editor a million years ago stuck us next to each other in cubicles, and nothing was ever accomplished again. But really, that's where it was, right? I think we had conversations about this in kind of flimsy perspective, flimsy details way back in the day. And now we're at a point where we're able to put that into action and really make it happen.
There's something to be said for the real value of teamwork in this industry. And when you talked about being in cubicles next to each other, I'm sure you did a lot of joking around, but at the same turn, you also relied on each other quite a bit too, not just in terms of the stories you were writing, but just in getting through the day. Right? I mean, talk about teamwork in this industry and the importance of it, Matthew.
Yeah, one of the things that's interesting about Matt, and you can hear it in the answers that we've already given about how we talk about journalism, is that our skills are super complementary. What I'm good at, maybe Matt's not quite as good at, and what Matt is really good at, I am terrible at, right? Like kind of the idea of digging into data, for example. Math was not, spreadsheets are not my strong suit, right? So whenever I needed at the World Herald, if I wanted to, for example, figure out how to file a Freedom of Information request, I had a guy sitting next to me that knew how to do that. And I would basically just make him, do my work in some way, right? But so there's certainly complementary skills, teamwork, but Matt and I for sure, we've known each other a long time at this point, and our kind of hearts are tied to this mission in a way that I think that it's sort of conjoined twins situation in some way at this point journalistically as we kind of head into this era of the Flatwater Free Press.
And what a nice segue. Did you like the conjoined?
Yeah, that was a
analogy
big graphic maybe.
I just wanted to ask Matt there before we moved on if he thought that was acceptable. Does that really fit the bill?
Sure, why not? Let's go with it.
Because we want to be straightforward, just the facts, right?
Right.
All right, so we have this Flatwater Free Press.
Yeah.
And I want to hear all about this, but I want to start with the name. Who would be most appropriate to ask that of? The history of the name.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that for a long time, we worked under other names, kind of knowing that they weren't going to be finalized. We had a few that we took to a focus group, and that focus group heard 3 of them and said, you can't use any of those.
Really?
Those are all terrible. Back to the drawing board. But during the course of that, one person was just kind of playing with words, them in Nebraska, and kind of these traditional words of journalism and First Amendment stuff. And she said those words together. I think she wrote them down or typed them in the chat. This was on Zoom, obviously, during COVID, and it fit. And the more we thought about it, we took it. It was a good idea, and we were able to workshop it and take it to people and say, "Are we doing this right?" Flatwater is a word that means Nebraska, but it's obviously not. Nebraska means flat water, I guess is the way to phrase it. Right. And it's from our the native Nebraskans. And so we wanted to talk to a couple people and make sure we were using this respectfully, that we were doing it correctly, that we weren't, about to do something silly. And they said, look, you're on the right track. It's okay. Free press then means 2 things, right? It means literally free. Our content will be literally free for any reader. It will be given for free to newspapers, to TV stations, to radio stations to run as they see fit. But it's also free press, freedom of the press. That's baked into the First Amendment, and that is important and vital. And it's gotten really unpopular lately. And I just wanted to put that front and center and make sure that people knew what we were about.
Matt, the overarching goal, when you talk about it being free and you're talking about all these things that you want to represent in the Flatwater Free Press. So I guess the goals are what?
It's heady stuff. It's big J journalism words. It's things like uncovering truth, lifting up diverse voices, and enlightening our society, our world, our life here in Nebraskans. We want to have Nebraskans telling stories to other Nebraskans about where they are. I feel like a lot of our kind of social fabric has frayed just during the course of my lifetime. And I don't know if journalism is the antidote, if it is a cause or an effect, but it's definitely a part. And we want to bring that back. We want to make sure that that plays a role, that we've got stories from across the state. We've got people in McCook telling people their stories about McCook to Omaha and vice versa, and places that I've never been to. That's what we're talking about. That's what we're trying to make happen.
This is absolutely going to be no small task, Matthew. This is going to be a pretty big endeavor, and you are charged with being editor of this whole process, reporting to Matt, I must say, for our viewers. So the guys in the cubicles now have some sort of hierarchy going on here, right? But I mean, that's going to be quite a lot to accomplish. How do you even begin with something? How are you going to get this done?
I think you begin just like you begin a big journalism project, right? You start. you have to take it step by step. I mean, yeah, when we step back and sort of, I hear Matt talking about the heady stuff. It is a little nerve-wracking, right? But the truth is we know how to do this. We know how to build journalistic projects. We've done it together in the past, and we know what we need. I mean, the first thing we need to do is hire some really talented reporters who know investigative reporting, who can do a lot of this work, and by the way, are given time and the proper amount of salary to be able to do it well and be paid for good work, right? That's important to both Matt and I. And so that's a starting point, right? And that's kind of more on the investigative projects side. So we're working on that right now. And then the other side of it, that story, what he talked about with, Nebraskans telling story to Nebraskans, it's, at the outside here, a lot of my work has been to find and assign stories to freelancers. And they are from, right now it's a range that runs from really experienced, decades of experience newspaper reporters who no longer work at a newspaper, to a high school senior who is going into she was the editor of her high school newspaper, and she's going into her freshman year of college, right? I mean, we are, and they're from Omaha at this point. They're from Omaha to Scottsbluff and Chadron, the geographic range. So we're really working to make this a statewide publication, especially on that freelance side, in every way we can. I think that is really important to both of us, by the way. It would have, and I've heard Matt say this, and I know I've said it to people, it would have been easy or easier in some way for us to just build this around Omaha. But it was super important to both of us to make this a statewide news source, to say we are Nebraska, we are Nebraskans, and we're going to tell stories in that kind of statewide way, even if it is harder, even if we are separated by many, many miles and by urban-rural splits, left, right, any divisions that you can think of. I mean, part of why we're doing this is, as Matt said earlier, to try to help people see their commonality as citizens of the state.
Okay, and we're going to come back to drill down a little bit more in terms of those people, because I'm sure many viewers' ears just perked up when you said that there were going to be some jobs available. So we're going to give them time to run and grab a piece of paper and a pen, so that as we revisit this in a few minutes, they'll be able to jot some things down. But in the meantime, Matt, how is this going to be funded then?
Yeah, I mean, we're blessed here. We have a strong, smart, forward-thinking philanthropic community, and they have gotten behind this in a big way. They have allowed us to at least start putting together enough of a budget to go out and hire people, really incredibly talented people with a straight face, and say, you have a job here. This is something that you can do. You can move to Nebraska and you can do this work at a really high level and be paid for it. Right now, that's how all of our funding, 100%, is from foundations so far. We have started to we have not gone to readers, regular folks, and asked for money yet. That is a future. While we are blessed to have our foundational support, we don't want to be, there's problems with that, right? You don't want to be beholden to anybody. And so broadening that base of support is really how this is going to last and make sense going forward. But we haven't gone to that yet, and already we have people. It's so heartening. We already have people that are, finding our donation page and giving money, and it's such a vote of confidence, and really, it lays bare the responsibility we have. We have to do this right for these people, right? Mm-hmm. That's who we are trying to serve.
Okay, and Matthew, you're going to launch in September. A couple questions. Where do people find you? Mm-hmm. And how often will you be posting news stories?
Yeah, where people find us is going to be it's an interesting answer to that question, right? I mean, you can definitely find us at flatwaterfreepress.org and on our social media, where we have an email newsletter that's actually already started. We sent out our second email newsletter this morning. And I think we have something close to 2,000, in the neighborhood of 2,000 people already getting our email newsletter. So we're, we just off there's an appetite for this that has been extremely heartening to both Matt and I. So all those traditional ways, right? Our website, flatwaterfreepress.org, the email newsletter, social media. But we've been going around and talking to media outlets from across the state about forming partnerships that allow them to use our content, these freelance feature stories and these investigative projects for free. And so I would imagine the hope is that if you're a citizen of Omaha or a citizen of Ogallala, you're going to be able to open your local newspaper, listen to your favored radio or TV station, or go to their websites and find our stuff there too.
I was going to ask that because there will be viewers, I know there are, watching thinking, okay, this sounds so cool. We've been waiting for this. This is going to be awesome. We want to support it financially, but I want to hold this in my hand. I do not want to have to turn on a computer once again, forget something else, because it seems like really that's the only way to get anything accomplished anymore. And we really do, and I'm not going to put this age specific, we really do have people out there who are very traditional. They want to pick up the newspaper, they still want to pick up the book. Sure. And so you kind of touched on that. But for those people who are now thinking, yeah, that was my question, your response then would be again?
It's going to be, obviously there's another side to these partnerships, which is the newspaper publishers and editors. But our meetings with them, our initial meetings with them have been incredibly positive. I think that my sense is out of those meetings is that a lot of newspapers, and this is true in other states as well that have done similar projects, the kind of legacy media in those places, which includes that tactile print newspaper, they get behind it and they see the value in it. So I am very confident that that's going to happen here as well, and the listeners that want to pick up that physical newspaper will be able to find Flatwater Free Press news in their newspaper.
You talked about other states too. Is there one common challenge that they find when they try to launch something like this? Are you reading about that? Are you hearing about it? Or has it literally been you just start at the beginning and you start each one reach one and that's the way it goes?
Yeah, there are 330 of these around the country at this point. And that it's a broad umbrella. It includes things that serve neighborhoods like Noise here in Omaha, or things that serve entire states or regions or verticals, right? Mm-hmm. Rural living in America, for instance. Well, that's nationwide. So there's really no one size fits all, but a lot of the ones that we think are analogous to what we're doing here, investigative enterprise, things that take time. There seems to be a pretty prescriptive path to how you make this work. You start small, 2 or 3 reporters, you show you can do the work, and you build from there. This is a virtuous cycle. It's a public good. And once you kind of show that works, once you kind of show the impact and that you can do it, it builds upon itself.
Okay, so for those people just coming back now, they've got their pieces of paper and pens. They're interested in this. They want to get involved in some way, shape, or form, even if it's just to reach out and say, congratulations, you guys. We think what you're doing is great. What do they do?
They have to go to our website, flatwaterfreepress.org. I think I've said that 3 times now. And on there, they will find the following things. They'll find a place where they can apply for a job. They will find a place where they can send in a story idea. They'll find a place where they can say that they want to freelance for us. And they'll also find, and look at, it's right up there up in the right-hand corner, they can find a little button that allows them to donate if they want to show us support here at the outset. So this is built to be both user-friendly and, maybe more of a cooperative experience than people might have thought of the media in the past, right? And that's not a knock on the media in any way. It's just that we're trying to build this in an open way. We want to have conversations with people about what they think is important, and we can let those conversations guide our journalism.
Okay, thank you. I have one final question, and you each have about 30 to 45 seconds to answer it. Favorite story, who wrote it, why is it your favorite? Matt?
Oh my God, 30 to 45 seconds. That's a hard question. So in the past couple of years, the Associated Press has freed slaves. That's pretty incredible. We've had the Me Too stories, but the two that really always stick out in my mind are the Washington Post's work after Ferguson, measuring exactly how many people were killed by police every year. That's a question that we couldn't answer as a society. And they put in that work, and now we know. And I'll be damned, the facts they speak for themselves. Another one that's a really deep cut, I was thinking about this, and it's a 15-year-old story I learned, written by a Nebraskan guy when he was living in Florida, where he went to city council meetings, and he saw citizens get up and pour their hearts out to their city councilors, ask them to make changes, and the city councilors kind of, they were maybe distracted. He got the logs of their internet usage, and he saw that while that person was going up and asking for help, they were planning vacations, or they were, trying to buy golf clubs and those sorts of things. Great piece.
Matthew, we left you 15 seconds.
That's perfect. I can do it in 15
Okay.
seconds. The story that comes to mind is a Washington Post feature story that involved taking a world-class violinist, the best violinist in the world, and putting him in a subway station in Washington, D.C., and seeing how many people stopped and if they could recognize beauty and what beauty is when it's ripped outside of context. A super important, deep story that's a feature story.
Matthew and Matt, I want to thank you both for joining us today. Flatwater
you.
Free Press, you're going to launch in September. We'll send lots of positive thoughts your way. And we, of course, wish you the very best. More information, folks can go to flatwaterfreepress.org or nebraskajournalismtrust.org. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And thank you all for watching. We'll see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at nebraskapublicmedia.org/considerthis. If you'd like to share your comments about this program, call UNO Television at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours, or send an email to cwyatt@unomaha.edu.